Welcome to the Discovery Doc podcast. I'm Dr. CeCe, functional medicine nurse practitioner, crunchy mama, and self-proclaimed toxin tamer. I'm also your co-host of this amazing podcast alongside my friend.
Hi, I'm Annah Kate, your medical mystery overachiever. I'm going to do all the things, ask all the questions, because we've had a very similar journey, and she knows way more than I do to get back to that functional, good place. But today we're going to hear more about her story. And then in our next episode, you'll get to learn more about me and how we got together on this Discovery Doc podcast and all the fun things and the birth of all of that. So,
yes.
Hey, tell us about you.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Where to start?
So, for me, I was always, I don't want to say always, but I was a pretty sick kid. I mean, constantly, there was just unexplainable things going on. And my mom, I just remember going in and out of doctor's offices, and there was even a cancer scare at one point that my mom didn't tell me for about a year afterwards.
Goodness.
Because I would just get swollen lymph nodes. I would get sick all the time. My hair was falling out. I mean, this was through teenage years. So looking back, a lot of that makes sense now that I know what I know. But when it truly started is my husband and I moved to Florida in 2013. And about 6 months after moving there, I started with a lot of chronic fatigue. My hair was falling out in clumps. I mean, I would leave the shower just bawling.
Yeah, that's fun.
my eyes out because, just massive balls of hair were falling out. And I remember being so foggy. I would drive, and we were in South Florida, it's sunny and beautiful and palm trees and all the things. And I would drive around and just flat, no emotion, no sense of where I'm going, or feeling if I was in a dream or truly present. So that is when I decided to go to a doctor. And the doctor at that point, basically, she found out that I have Hashimoto's. And basically said, here, Synthroid, that's it. There's nothing else you can do for the rest of your life. Just be on this medication. And actually backing up, a key point of this, and I didn't realize this until later, was when I was first getting a job in the hospital, I had to prove that I was immune. I was fully vaccinated as a kid, but I had to prove that I was immune to everything. Yes.
How do you even do that?
Yes. So they draw your titers, meaning they draw your blood and they show your antibodies. So medical records of being vaccinated weren't enough. They wanted to know that right. Topic for another time.
If you're listening on the podcast, I just gave a really big eye roll. You all got to see that in YouTube land.
Yes. The side eye is real. But I was not immune, fun fact, to measles, mumps, rubella, or diphtheria. And so on the spot for this training, I was becoming a medical scribe. On the spot, they gave me those vaccines. Then we're at training.
Ouch! My arm hurts just thinking about that. I don't remember how painful those were.
I know, they stink. But we were in training in Texas for this company that I was just becoming a scribe for, working in South Florida. So I get those vaccinations. And about 4 weeks after that is when all my symptoms really took flight. So that's a dot that I connect nowadays. I didn't see that back then, but went to that first doctor. She said Hashimoto's. And then about a year went by and it was the same.
Yeah.
Nothing changed, And I went back to her and she called herself more integrative, but all she did was a food allergy test. And told me about 17 foods I couldn't eat.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
So I was like, cool, great. I'll take those out. Took them out, didn't do anything. That then started the journey where over the next probably 4 years, I went to about 36 total, 36 physicians, endocrinologists, infectious disease, family practice, you name it, because things were just spiraling.
Yeah.
And the fatigue was insane. My joints were locking. I would get out of bed and my ankles would just lock. And it would take me about an hour for them to, I would walk like this, very stiff. For the first hour and a half that I was awake. I remember by this point I had Ava. And I remember parking outside of a Target in Florida and getting outside, and she's like maybe one, like baby. And I called my husband and I was like, babe, I don't know what kind of car I drive.
Yep.
Like, not the color, not just where I park. You know, we all forget where we park sometimes, right? But literally, I could not remember, is it an SUV? Is it a small car? And I'm there with my 1-year-old and just sheer panic. But that's how bad my memory was.
Mm-hmm.
My, like, I mean, word retrieval, forget it, was going out the window. I spent years managing my energy just to be able to go out to dinner, you know, at 24, 25, 26 years old.
Yeah.
So, anyways, through all these doctors, the only consistent thing that was told was your thyroid's okay, your levels look good, everything looks good. Oh, you're tired because you just had a baby. And that was through Ava and Jackson. And I'm like, y'all, this is not newborn tired. This is not newborn fatigue. Like, I know what that is. I understand what that feels like. And this is so much worse. You know, it's just so much different, I should say, than the fatigue you get with after having a newborn. So my mom, throughout the years, saw naturopathic physicians. And it was a hard concept at the time because I was in school for conventional practice, right? Going through my master's and my doctorate, it's conventional minded. And so I actually remember the physician, the naturopathic physician that she was seeing. I remember her asking me to go see him, and it's the one we both know.
Yep.
And I looked at her and I said, he's a quack. Like, no way would I ever, you know, go into that side of the world. But it's because of how my brain was trained, right, in school. And it wasn't until after I had Jackson that, I mean, I thought things were bad before that. And then it just, I mean, it spiraled even more. I spent more time in bed and hearing my kids play outside with my husband. And that is like, as a mom, that just like eats your soul. You know, when you want to, like, you in your brain, you want to so bad, but your body will not let you. I know you can relate. I'm like, you're over here like, yes.
And it's real fun when your brain is not connected to the rest of your body. Because you can think all the things, you know what your car is, you know your phone number, you can remember the phone number when you actually had a landline. Your brain works on the inside, but it's not connected.
I used to say this all the time. I would tell doctors, I would say, it feels, and this is actually a question I ask my patients now, why I know it so specifically, is because I used to say that my head feels like it's 500 miles from my body, that it can think clearly on its own little abyss, but it is not connected to me physically. Like, I cannot feel present. I cannot, like, even in a conversation, I would walk away and have no idea what just happened, what we just talked about. It's a terrible feeling.
It is. And we'll get into the organization and how to facilitate remembering things in future episodes, because that's like, I feel you on that one. I mean, it is so hard to explain what we've both been through if you haven't been through it. But once you've been through it, you're like, oh, well, yeah, I get that. So that's what that is. Oh, I know what that is now.
And it's this, right. And it's the same thing when I talk to patients, I'll use very specific adjectives and they're like, yes, that. And it's like, no one else could be able to say that if you haven't been through it. You know, but so all that was happening after Jackson, and finally, no, actually, I think a little before that, maybe when I was pregnant with Jackson. Yes, when I was pregnant with Jackson, I finally gave in to see a naturopathic physician because I was just, at that point, I was just like pineapples. Like, I need something to change. I'm willing to go wherever, whenever to get this figured out. And it wasn't initially found that I had Lyme disease, but after I gave birth to Jackson, because I think my antibodies were just like suppressed and my body was not showing what was truly there. And then pregnancy is very autoimmune inducing. So antibodies tend to shift. And after, yes, after having Jackson, you know, things just popped up on my labs that weren't there prior. But I have no doubt that the Lyme test that showed for the first time that I had Lyme disease, that if we had looked at it, you know, 8 years previous, it would have been positive.
Yeah.
You know, I'm very sure on that. So yeah, I was found out that I had Lyme disease, and it was frightening. I didn't know. I mean, I wasn't taught anything about Lyme disease in school at all.
Lyme disease does not exist.
No, it doesn't exist. And
especially with allopathic doctors, they're like, oh, it's not a thing.
Yeah, no.
Or here's an antibiotic and take it for 10 weeks or whatever it is.
And that's it.
No, don't do that.
Doesn't work. But no, but it's true. In school, I mean, I remember looking back on it, and it was briefly talked about in school. And we were in South Florida, and they just said, hey, you know, it doesn't exist down here. So be mindful if you're in the Northeast, but that's it.
Yes. Lyme, Connecticut is where Lyme
originated,
and it didn't stay there.
I say this, I'm always like, ticks don't know state borders, you know, and it's not even only tick-borne. So anyways, that's a topic for a different time. But yes, that was found, and it made sense, but at the time was very, very frightening. But it was good to have an answer. Yeah. And it explained everything. It explained how I was feeling cognitively and physically and emotionally too, because it impacted, my anxiety was heightened. All these things were happening that I just never had. And it's really hard to deal with those things in your mid-20s when all your friends are out and partying and having an amazing time. And I'm just like, either my body's in too much pain to do something, or I literally cannot connect to you sitting across from a table. I just can't. And there's no way to describe that. There's just something that's missing. Or I was too darn tired.
Yep. And I think that, one, we need to have our moms on and have a conversation because they're watching their two vibrant daughters who are ready to conquer the world become shells of themselves because it's so draining and debilitating, and it's hard to watch. I mean, you have babies, and it's hard to watch when they have a cold or when they're sick, or like imagine something that you can't figure out and you don't know where it came from or what's happening, and just like that's scary too. So do you think that just the firestorm started with the MMR and pregnancy, or like what was the trigger? What was the trigger for you?
And such a great question, because triggers are so important, right? Like that's my job in practice, is to usually find most people's triggers. And I think it was an accumulative factor. I think that looking back and how sick I was as a kid and how I had unexplainable symptoms all the time. I mean, my mom, she used to take me downtown Chicago to get Chinese medicine, to get these herbs that were nasty. I mean, and we would boil them and create tea out of them. But it was the only thing that when I was, I think about, we'll have to confirm with her, but about 13, 14 years old, it was the only thing that stopped my hair from falling out. And just those symptoms that I was having, I think that it was something that I was exposed to much younger. But what tends to happen with most people is there's some sort of trigger, right? So I think that things through high school years kind of settled down. And then college, I was okay in college, but you know how college kids take care of themselves, right? Like, I mean, like pulling all-nighters and eating ramen. So
caffeine.
Yes, exactly. So I think finally, you know, we moved to Florida right after I graduated college. So I think my body was in a very sensitive state of just being run down. And then, yes, I do think that getting the Tdap and the MMR vaccines in the same day, just for me, where my immune system was at, where my just body was at, was absolutely a trigger for me. And, you know, when you look into these vaccines with MMR, let's say, there are certain stipulations on when someone should and should not get that. And I fall into the category of someone who should not get that. If there's a first degree relative that has any immune dysfunction or autoimmune disease, such as hypothyroidism or
Yep.
Hashimoto's.
Yep.
My mom has Hashimoto's. So there is a first degree relative of mine that has an autoimmune disease. Yet I then unknowingly, got that vaccine, which I should have never gotten. And that's per the CDC. So I do think that in that moment, I mean, it's not a coincidence that a month later I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's when I never, I didn't have symptoms of that beforehand.
Right.
So I do think that was a big trigger for me personally.
And that's a great question to ask. If you're having these mystery weird symptoms and needing to know if you need to go get something, asking first degree relatives if they've got these things, and then asking your healthcare provider, hey, I have a first degree relative that has these things. Should I get this? Because I can't get vaccines because my D-dimer is high.
Right.
Like I didn't know that until I figured out all of my, we'll get into that later.
And unfortunately, so many times it's up to the patient to know that, because most providers are not asking that question.
Right.
I ask it now because of how I practice, but even when I was taking my Ava and Jackson to the pediatrician in Florida, never once did they ask about my history, if I had an autoimmune disease, before administering vaccinations. So it's unfortunately something that, as patients, we want to empower y'all to know what questions to ask your providers.
That's really important, because we all know that, hey, do you know anybody that has had a heart attack or stroke? And those are all the questions of, okay, no. But what are the questions that you actually need to ask that are pertinent to you and that you want your provider to ask?
Yeah.
So, and if they're not asking these questions, go find another provider.
Exactly. Someone who will listen, because I do. And that's another point, is I think that through, the 7 years that I was going through all these symptoms, no one listened. No one took the symptoms that I was saying seriously.
Right.
I got the, it's all in your head. I got the, you look good. You look fine. Like physically, I looked fine. And I was really, really good at hiding it too. But never once did I get a practitioner who was like, I hear you. This is not normal. We need to investigate what's going on, until I turned to functional medicine. And that obviously was life-changing. Exactly. Yes, I'm happy to be here.
I'm so glad that she came over to this side, because you saw 36 doctors or something trying to figure it all out. And I have a very similar story of trying to figure it out, and even getting into a naturopath and integrative medicine. It took me a couple of doctors to figure out, knowing what we know about Lyme now and having kind of the right treatment, which is what my next question for you is getting to the place where, one, you get listened to, and someone that can put together the pieces because their brain works in a different way.
Out of the box. Yeah.
Right. And then I can't even say the word. I always say the words wrong. So I just use the abbreviation, the SOT, the supportive oligonucleotide therapy.
So close.
So close.
Oligonucleotide.
Okay.
Yes.
Oligonucleotide.
We'll stick to SOT.
SOT. Yes. So that's another part where our stories converge on that kind of therapy. And it made the biggest difference. And I think if I ever get anything else that SOT can treat and turn on. So think about it this way. And this is how it worked in my brain, that what it does, it's a kill switch. It turns off the replicating gene light switch for the spirochetes and the Lyme and all of that. So,
and I think we should pause right there. I think we should go into that a little bit more, backing up just a tad because I think this is also important. I don't know we're going to talk about you in a sec. I don't know where you went or started with your journey, but because I had such a conventional background, when I heard Lyme disease, I went conventional. Even though I had a naturopathic doctor saying, hey, this is how we treat it, I was like, no, but that's not what I've been taught for the 32 seconds that I was taught something. So I went through the antibiotics, and then when that didn't do anything, then I went through all of the herbs, all the supplements, Brunner's protocol. I mean, anything I could get my hands on. My whole pantry was hundreds of herbal tinctures, all the things, right? Fast forward about a year later, and those herbal tinctures they made me feel like garbage. But something in your brain is like, well, I'm herxing, and so I'm getting rid of something, so this is a good thing, and it's really not.
Herxing's not a good thing.
Yeah, it's not a good sign. It means your immune system is not ready. But then I finally listened.
Yeah.
But I had to go through my own journey, and I do have some patients who have to go through that too, where I tried the things that I'm taught before I went to SOT. And I think that's a huge learning point for my patients as well. And what I try to teach is why we utilize SOT.
Right.
And so SOT, as Anna Kate tried to say earlier, supportive oligonucleotide therapy. This is a treatment that I currently use for my patients, but that really truly did save my quality of life. And so why we use it is because when we try to attack that spirochete, so Lyme is shaped like a corkscrew, right? Which is a spirochete. Yes, they're little, whats. And I always call them he's. I'm sorry. I always call it a boy. I'm like those little guys. But what they're really good at is digging, right? And so in terms of adapting. So if we take things orally, or we have a PICC line, or we have all these IV antibiotics, whatever it is, those corkscrews like to dig out of the bloodstream into places where there's lack of blood flow, where they're safe.
Yep.
And that's why some patients will feel better when they're on the antibiotics or on the herbs, because those things are now out of the bloodstream, hiding, replicating.
Right.
And then I know you're like, yes, chomping at the bit. And then when we stop, I'm sure, as you know, when we stop taking the antibiotic or the herbs, what I find now clinically is about 2 weeks later, patients, their symptoms escalate. So we have to think that all those little spirochetes that have been away, kind of in the background, replicating, now they're coming back to the forefront. Labs will look worse. Patients will feel worse. So the huge difference between SOT and herbs or antibiotics is that herbs and antibiotics try to attack that spirochete from the outside. They do this.
Yep.
And in doing so, our immune system sees that and it's like, whoa, what's going on over there? I'm going to interfere. And now we herx, or that little booger is like, nah, I'm going to go hide.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And to your point, SOT, it is made for the Lyme spirochete specifically. It doesn't look foreign to it. It is allowed to permeate the cell wall, to get inside, to attach to the receptor that's made for cell replication and turn that cell off from the inside out, which means there's no Herxheimer reaction, because a true Herxheimer reaction is our immune system attacking that thing, right? So it doesn't allow for that. Now we see other things, but that's another topic.
Another topic entirely.
Yes, it's the third time I've said that. But we don't see true Herx reactions because our immune system doesn't recognize that SOT molecule as foreign.
Right.
So yes, you're exactly right in the sense that it is like a turn-off switch for that bacteria. It does not allow that bacteria to replicate. It induces cell apoptosis, or cell death, from the inside out, which is massive. So yeah.
I like when the spirochetes explode and they don't make my cells explode, because when you put in so many antibiotics, they get irritated or pissed off, or they like to play hide and go seek, and they go and hide, and they get in places that they shouldn't be. And
antibiotics, the molecules are so big that it destroys other things that SOT molecules can't, right? We obviously know it rips apart your GI tract and your microbiomes everywhere.
which is another aid in recovery of why you feel, when you have these autoimmune things, you feel so bad. So it's not just eliminating the spirochete and dealing with that, but it's also like, I always think of my insides, and I'm still in recovery and dealing with things, but I feel like my insides are Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
Like everything, because I had it for so long.
Yes. No, this is a wonderful point too, because part of what in my journey, the first time around that I did SOT, where I take fault in that I did SOT And SOT in essence is antisense molecule or an antisense strain.
Doesn't hurt to do, doesn't cause side effects.
There are no, I mean, in the history of SOT, there's been no adverse reactions because it's just the flip of a molecule of something that's already in you and sterile water and normal saline. Ask your provider for more information.
Yes.
Your functional medicine provider. Because conventional doctors will be like, what the heck is this? But what were you saying?
Swiss cheese?
Swiss cheese. Yeah, Swiss cheese. So to your point, the first time around, I did SOT and I felt so good. I mean, so good that I didn't go back to that naturopathic doctor. And that's on me. That's my fault because when there's Lyme, there's usually a multitude of friends, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't take care of those multitude of friends because I felt so good. So then about 6-9 months after SOT, I crashed again. And then I did it the right way the second time around. So I did have to get 2 SOTs for Lyme specifically, but that again is my fault because I just did not follow up. And then when I appropriately and strategically took care of those other co-infections, that was what in the long run was a game changer. But something I say to patients all the time too, and what you've said, is you can take that bacteria away. You can take that spirochete away, and that's amazing. And SOT to date is the most effective way at doing that, but it doesn't magically fix the damage that it's created.
Right.
And that oftentimes for patients who've had it for a very long time, it's a much longer journey than actually eradicating the bug.
Yep. The easy part's turning it off.
Yes. The hard part is recovery. 100%. Yes.
Hi, I'm Annah Kate, and I'm in long-term recovery.
Yes.
So that's another part where our journeys coincide because, and I'll tell you all about this when I tell you, but I not only had Lyme, but I had also 18 other co-infections.
18.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
And that's where I feel, I think where our journey separates too, is because I dealt with, Epstein-Barr virus. And that's really what flared post. And I was just so fatigued, that like flu-y, achy body pain. And it was really EBV that was flaring. But other than that, thank God there was nothing else, that I had going on. And so I think that my recovery phase was able to be much shorter.
Lucky you.
I know.
I was so sick that I had Epstein-Barr, which is mono. And if you've ever known anybody that has mono, you feel terrible and they don't do anything. I was so sick, I had mono and didn't know it.
Yeah, it's not fun.
I had so much other fun things going on. So we're going to get back into the mama question as we finish kind of wrapping up your initial story of what kind of led you to this place, because you are a mama and you want to live those toxin-free lifestyles and help other mamas do that as well, and other individuals that are not mamas or want to be mamas. So how did Lyme affect your pregnancies and navigating all of that? Because that's scary too. And why I've been married for 7 years at this point and have waited because I didn't want to.
That's right. Our anniversaries are so close.
I know,
oh my God. Mine is in 2 days.
Yeah, yours is this weekend.
Oh God. So, I wonder if my husband knows that.
Well,
we won't
help him find the keys.
Okay.
And
yes.
So this will
we had a key issue this morning.
We'll let you know when this posts and goes live whether he remembered his anniversary or not. So.
Oh, don't put him on blast like that. He's gonna be mad.
Oh, well, this will come out in September. It'll be right before my anniversary. But like I was scared. Like I don't want to, because there's 2 ways that you can get, or typically there's 2 ways that you can get bit by a tick or get mosquito or spider.
Vector-borne, so fleas, flies, ticks, mosquitoes. There is also literature where it can be passed via vaginal secretions. So mom to baby, and also obviously partner to partner. So I do want to dive into my pregnancies because that's a huge, Lyme disease played a huge role in my first 2, which we'll be talking about on another episode. So stay tuned.
Yeah. So we'll dive deep into those.
But I think as the mom part, it was, so as a human, forget the mom part. As a human, it was really, really hard from 21 to 28 to feel like I was in my 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And none of my friends, like, I'm very outgoing and bubbly and just like talk a lot. And then I can get super awkward and like all my friends just know that and it's fine. um, but I would manage my energy so perfectly that I could present myself like that to them. My best friends, I mean, everybody, nobody in Florida knew that I was going through, and those friends are like my family. Nobody knew I was going through that except for my husband. And he would get all of it because I would keep it in, when I'm around other people. And then I'd get to him and bless his soul, but like no emotion, flat, like no energy to even. I remember getting home from work some days or like clinical some days and not being able to open my mouth because I just physically could not talk.
Right.
And he got that. And like the migraines, the headaches, the forgetfulness, the not being able to hold conversations with him, he got all of that. And so that like really, it sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks. And then I had, with Ava, I feel the worst for Ava because Ava, for the first 3 years of her life, I was very disconnected. Like, even after I had her, I didn't feel connected to her
right.
in a way that I felt like a mom should because I was so flat and I didn't have energy for those emotions. And not being able to be present as I wanted to be because I just didn't have I couldn't.
Yeah.
I physically and mentally couldn't. That kills me. And I feel like Ava, like, thank goodness with Jack, I had like that second round of SOT and all that stuff happened when he was only 6 months old. So I'm like, for what he can remember, I feel okay. But I always feel like Ava got gypped because of how sick I was. And that sucks.
But she's got an amazing mama, and you have 3
I
amazingly
know.
beautiful children.
I just feel it. I feel so deeply about it and so like guilt about it. And that will never go away. It won't. And it'll never go away even with Will, is like what he had to go through because of how I felt. It's not a good place to be.
And it's hard to explain because spouses want you to just go to the doctor and get it fixed or see what else you can do or what. And it's like, it's not that. It's, I've stayed up too late. I did too much. Like, I now have a thing with the sun that I have a choice.
Yeah.
I can be out in the sun and then I walk like I'm 90 and it hurts. And I'm like,
and that,
how do you explain that to your spouse?
You can't. And Will, he was so patient with me, but even at certain points, because Lyme disease is not something you can see. At least I know with you, and again, we'll talk about this, but joints and everything and like, swelling. Physically, you looked at me and I looked like a healthy human. Nothing wrong. And I think as a spouse, at some point, that also enters their brain that you look okay. And like, I get that you might feel well or not feel well, but I need you to kind of suck it up and get through. And there was little points where, Will would, and I never could expect him to fully understand. You just can't, because he won't go, right? He'll never go through that, God willing. But there definitely were times and points where he didn't understand because I looked fine. 98% of the time, though, that man was so supportive and just like, we got to do what we got to do. Like, hey, if you need to take care of this, you need to go here, you need to do this. Like, what do I need to do to help you on this journey? I wouldn't have been able to get through it without him.
No.
Yeah.
It does take a support team and a village, and thank God for them.
Yes.
For real.
Yeah.
So, but still, it's hard to be like, no, I just need to rest. Like, leave me alone.
Right.
I need to sleep.
Yeah.
I need to reset. I need to, life takes a toll, and how stress things happen. Like, so did you notice that when you were pregnant in your first 2 pregnancies, that that created a stressor on your body that triggered flares or triggered things. And it's not a bad stress, but it's just
it is a stressor. Yeah, it is a stressor. And the biggest teller is that my first 2 pregnancies, I had issues in them both. My third one, where Lyme was gone, was the best pregnancy I've ever had. Yeah. So yes, that absolutely caused me to go into flares for sure.
Well, we'll have to dive into that and have a whole conversation about pregnancy and Lyme and flares and autoimmune flares while pregnant and all of that other stuff. So we will get into that in another episode and dive in deeper. And so on our next episode, I want to talk about how you got from allopathic being all Western medicine to getting to the point where the Discovery Doc was born.
Yeah.
I want to know all about that story.
All right, y'all. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us on this very personal exploration of my journey with Lyme disease. Please join us on the next episode as we discuss, like Annah Kate just said, the birth of the Discovery Doc and all the details about this chick right here.
Yeah, you'll get to know my medical mystery overachiever checklist.
It's a long one.
It's a fun one, but hopefully it will help you understand where you are and the questions that you have. So if you have any questions, we'll have all of that down in the show notes and everything where you can connect with us and get to know us over these next couple of first introductory episodes. And then we'll go through and tell you what's coming next. We're excited.
Yes, we are. We'll see y'all later.